My name is Jeff Barczewski, and this title of my talk is React for the Win. Who am I? Some of you may know me from the group, but I'm one of the old timers. 26 years as a developer. Last 3 or so been with JavaScript and Node. Since January, I've been working on my own project, Code Wins, and I'm really focusing on trying to put together high-quality video training for web developers. So React, Happy, Node. You can follow me on Twitter and GitHub at Jeff Bieske, or my email is jeff@codewins. Question for you all. What are your greatest difficulties or challenges when you're building web apps? So just throw it out there. Any challenges or difficulties that you have?
Users.
Business team, requirements shifting, or deadlines, or
Imaginary deadlines.
Yeah.
The handling of the model from the server side to the HTML, from the database to the HTML. To
Yeah.
the JavaScript.
Right. Yeah. Should be easier, right? Any other things that you struggle with, or? All right.
Coordinating state and UI.
Yeah, you got different things that.
How do you make different parts of the model sync up?
Yeah.
Maybe like user input, like dealing with, especially on single page applications, like at what point do you check user input for security issues or anything like that? And that, just a general topic.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, one of the reasons I asked that or whatever is I think that's kind of at the heart of why I'm here and why React is what it is, and why any new technology that comes along, it's trying to help with something. It's trying to make something a little easier, trying to make things a little smoother, simpler. At Strangeloop, I don't know if whoever was there last fall, Joe Armstrong was there, the inventor of Erlang. And he had a keynote called "The Mess We're In." And he said, if we don't understand how things work, how can we validate, optimize, or improve them? And he went on to talk about how many, when you have all these technologies, like nowadays we have to worry about so many different things. It used to be in the old days, it was like shell and C and make, and that was pretty much it. Now you have, make and Java and C++ and C# and Grunt and Gulp and you just go on and on. Angular, React, whatever. I mean, there's just so many things, and even just getting up and going, and then and then there's all these DSLs. Like even if you're in Ruby, then there's DSLs for everything now. So you got to learn a language that describes your models or describes your your REST layer. So there's just it's gotten more complicated, more complex, and he was basically positing that we should try to find ways to to simplify that. We should also try to complete code and document code and train people and mentor and pass the torch and all that, and write books about software, just to help these different things. So.
Well, on that same topic. With all the frameworks that are out there right now, it's like, how do you pick the right one
Right.
that is going to be long?
Right. It's not going to be gone tomorrow, right? Yeah.
In 2 years,
Right. Exactly. And that's what's hard. I think that's I don't think it's nearly impossible for anybody to keep up with this stuff. I mean, on their own. I mean, there's so many things every day. There's new stuff coming out, and how do you keep up with it? So I'm going to here to talk to you about React. React has really hit a sweet spot for me, and it really resonated with me. And it was kind of just by chance how I actually got involved. I got to meet some of the creators from Facebook. Yeah, it's really something different, something special, and So I want to go through that. I want to talk about some of the core concepts of React, and then I want to talk a little bit about the family, so you can get a kind of idea of the other pieces in there, because React is one piece, but then there's actually other pieces that you can use together with that. React Router, Flux, and React Native. And I won't have time to go into a lot of depth in any of those things, but I just want to at least be aware of what's out there, and so you can know where to look and what to go from next. Is anybody else out there using React? Back there? Okay, a couple? All right, well, if I get anything wrong or if I get stuck, I'm point to you guys, and you can chime in and bail me out. So, all right. So what makes React special? For one thing, it's just simple to learn. I mean, there's just not a lot to it. I know that like with Angular, you can get going pretty quickly. There's a lot of tutorials where they get going and start showing things. But then, to do more with the framework, you really got to learn a lot more concepts. You got lots of things to learn, and then you can do some more, and then there's a lot more to learn, and it's kind of this hill and valley approach or something that you go on. And React is just simpler. So, it doesn't do as much as Angular, and there's not as much to learn, and the way they've abstracted things is pretty simple. So. For me, it was easy for me to pick up. So that's one thing I like about it. Another thing I like about it is it's composable components. And we've heard the word components, thrown around. And all I mean by that, because it's not necessarily web components, but the idea of components being a self-contained container with like a function, that you have the inputs and you have the outputs, and that's it. And there's nothing, you don't have to worry about anything else. Once you're inside that container, then that's all you need to worry about is what's coming in and out. You don't have to think about a lot of other things. So that's always good. And you can build these things up pretty powerfully if you do that. Another thing is it's declarative. So we're not doing a lot of DOM manipulation like we used to with jQuery or these other old frameworks. We basically say, this is what we want the HTML to be, and then, okay, React, do it, and then later on when we want to change it, we say, okay, this is what we want it to be now, and it'll figure out what's different and just make the minor changes that need to be made to update it. So it makes it pretty simple. It's kind of, in a way, almost like the old days of writing from the server. We're rendering from the server, just the whole page. You don't have to worry about, the state and all that. It takes care of dealing with that. It's also easy to use with existing project. This is what's really neat about it too. This is with Angular or Ember. You kind of have to jump in with those. You want to kind of build your projects around those. And I know Mark has showed in some of his training there's ways to evolve that, but you kind of really have to, buy into going one way or the other, and you're kind of all in with those types of solutions, from my understanding, or what I've seen. And React is such a smaller piece of the puzzle. It'll work with anything. So it'll work inside of an Angular project. It'll work inside of an Ember project. It'll work in a jQuery project or just a piece of the page. So it's really, you can carve out and start using it. You don't need to have a lot of things coming in to use it. And it makes it pretty exciting. So you can really start to use it for pieces of your page, evolve that, and then use more and stuff. So let's see if I got anything else here. Another couple things. Well, I guess I'll show you in the app. But basically, another couple things that React can do is it's able to be rendered on the server as well. So they call the term they're using for now is isomorphic, and isomorphic JavaScript, meaning you can run it on the client, run it on the server, and that's pretty nice. For a long time we've been trying to have code that we could write once and use it client server. And we might have been able to do pieces of it. Might have been able to do the validations or certain things like that. But it was hard to get the whole piece. And maybe, in React, you can actually render the page on the server so your search engines can pick it up and then ship that down to the client. And then the client, when it picks it up and loads JavaScript, it says, oh, I've got some React code here, and oh, I've already got some HTML. Looks at it and says, it all looks the same. I'll just add these event listeners and I'm done. you know, and so it's a very fast load. There's no flash of blank page or anything like that, you know. It's as soon as it comes down, the person has something in their browser that they can see, and then they're just basically, the event listeners are tacked on top, and then from there it's a dynamic page again. So you know, then it's just like a single page app. So you have the kind of the best of both worlds. You got the single page app experience and speed, and you only have to write this code once, and then you can run it in both places. So we've been really trying to get there for a long time, and now that we have JavaScript on the server, we can do that. And there's also projects that run this from Rails too. I think there's a React Rails project that you know, you can render on the server as well. So my friend Kevin Old has been doing I guess an upgrade at Coupa, and they have a large system, lots of code, and he really wanted to try to use React with it. So he put together a prototype and really dug in and you know, showed the team that, and they were really impressed what he was able to accomplish so quickly. And he just talked with him the other day, and he said, "I've been surprised at how easy it was to incorporate in a very established code base." He said, "I was able to set up tooling, NPM and Webpack outside of Rails, produce a bundle of my common libs and a separate bundle for React and Flux app itself, include those in a div on the page, and it just works." You know, so he was real impressed. He said, "Related to my team, I've been able to teach React and Flux to 2 developers and have them writing what I consider production quality code in 2 weeks." So that's kind of what I was talking about, the simplicity. So it's it just works, and it's much simpler. There's not as much to it. So let's jump over and see some code. So, all right. So I've got what I like to do when I start out. I'm actually going to build up I'm going to take a boilerplate project that's got just some wiring set up and some minimal code, and I'm going to pull that up and just show you kind of how I like to work when I build up a project, and I'll just kind of talk through some of that as we go. So I've got a function that's called get clone init, which is basically going to clone a local repo here, and I've got a base React one ready to go, and I'm going to we'll just call this STLJS example 1. Okay, so I cloned that. Jump into there, and now I'm ready to do an install. And this is just pulling down from NPM all of the packages I need. So React and Babel. I'm using Babel to change my ES6 code into ES5 code. I'm using browser sync to render a page that refreshes when I change the code, and browserify to package up and bundle my JavaScript. So right now I'm just building some of the modules that basically watch the code. It's the C that does that. So as soon as it gets done here, we can fire that up.
So the template you cloned, that's one that you cooked up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like to start with a boilerplate. I mean, you could do this with a generator or something like a Yeoman generator. But I've never seen the need to go that far with it. I usually like to just have a repo that's got like my base stuff. It's got all my, you know, kind of my default settings, my default ESLint, you know, in there. It's kind of got my default tasks for I'm using npm run scripts to do my builds. And so it's got all that in there. It's kind of all set up. I just do npm install, and I'm ready to go. And then I've actually got just a couple pieces of code just in place so it's ready to run. Okay, so we did install. So now if we do a watch, then we should be able to launch up the app and bring it up. The browser file is what is my main file here. So just jumping through. Can everybody see that back there? So first, just walking through kind of what's in this code. I've got just a polyfill here. I'm bringing in some ES6 polyfill stuff. There's only a couple things right now, but I've got basically a place where I can bring in like object.assign or set or map, some of the things that actually need a polyfill. Babel can do most everything without a polyfill, but there's certain things that you need. And so depending on what you're using, you put them in this file. Then React is being imported next, so that's just pulling in React. Then I'm pulling in an isomorphic HTTP client called Axios. This is kind of similar. I think it was inspired by the Angular client, so it's got some of the same API or similarities to it, according to the author. So I pull that in, and then basically I'm ready to start with my main app or my main component. And I'm using ES6 style here. So I've got a class, and it's app, and I'm extending React component. So that gives me everything I need. All I really need to do at this point is create a render method. And so that's the heart of React. You can do 80% of your work, 85% of your work with just the render method, and that's pretty much all you need to do. There's stuff you can use if you need to go beyond that, but that's, you can do a lot with just that. So not a lot to learn, so that's what I like. And basically, if we walk through this render method, I've just got this const, which is basically like a var statement. But basically, I'm just doing this for convenience. So I kind of like to list out the things that are coming in. Things come in on the system through this.props. So the props is where things come in. There's also this.props or this.state if you wanted to manage some state internal to your component. But basically, those are the things that you can use to keep track of things and render. And so I'm just assigning a local variable here so that I kind of to draw my eyes to it. Go ahead, Mark.
If I remember right from an article I looked at, those props come from attributes on the HTML element?
Yeah, in the JSX or the call that you're calling in from. Yeah.
I was a little confused by that at first. I wish that they would have just called that adders. Then I would have.
Okay. Yeah. I don't. Shows the word property. So I'm just creating a local variable that to keep track. And so if I had more things, I would list them out here. And then basically the next line here, this return statement is I'm returning. I'm using JSX, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But it's basically similar to HTML. It's a language very close to HTML that's designed to make it easy to render a virtual DOM. It's actually creating a virtual DOM. And then later on, React is taking that virtual DOM and actually putting it to the real DOM. So it's actually making updates to the real DOM. But all I have to do is render this tree in this syntax like this, and it basically gives me this virtual tree. Go ahead.
Where does JSX come from? Is that part of React?
It was kind of created for React, but you can, like Babel supports it now. So it's such as Babel, the transform, the transpiler. So Babel supports it natively. So you don't need to really do anything else. You can, if you're using Babel, which is what I am, then you can transform or transpile your JSX with that as well, because it's such a simple transform. But yeah, it was created for the React project. It wouldn't necessarily have to be only for that, but it's but that's what.
Running a node, I would run node, and then I would load Babel, and that would run a JSX file.
Yeah, Babel. In fact, right now Babel is running in the background for me. If I pull up a package JSON, so right here on the well, it's part of Browserify right now. So in this line here, this watch.js file, I'm actually watching the browser file, and then as part of Browserify, it actually is specifying a Babelify. So up here in the transform is actually where I've specified Babelify. And so that's actually doing it as part of Browserify. You could also, it also is a command line. And so you can basically just do run Babel or Babel-W to watch, and it'll take files and transform them into an output directory. And they basically can go from ES6 or ES7, even the newest stuff, to ES5 code. And JSX is one of the things that it supports. So anyway, so this JSX code is what we're returning here, and what I've got is I've got a div, and then I've got an unordered list. And then if you're familiar with the mapping over an array, so I was passed in an array of items, and so then basically mapping over it, and so for each item, I'm going to generate a list item. So, and I'm giving it a key. A key is just a special property that that React, you could leave it out, but it helps with its optimizations when it's trying to determine if things are new. So if you have a unique key with the data, you can go ahead and give it to it, and then it helps with its logic. And then basically you can do whatever you want with the properties. And the syntax here that you see is when you want to put something into the when you want to run code or put execute code to into the HTML, or then you use the brace, two braces, kind of similar to mustache or something like that. And we're actually running the code, and then here is another brace. We're putting in the ID for the key, and then here's another brace. We're putting item.name in for the contents of the list item. So, all right, Mark.
So you showed how you switch from JSX into JavaScript essentially with curly braces, and then when you're going the other direction from JavaScript to JSX, do you always have to surround the JSX with parens?
No, you don't. I put the parens in because it's kind of a good habit to get into. If you're going to do multiple line JSX, then if you put that in, then it won't terminate too soon or whatever. So it basically won't have any issues with multiple lines. You don't have to, if you're going to put it on a single line or whatever, then you can leave off the parents. For multiple lines, yeah.
What exactly is a React component?
This right here, this class.app is a React component.
Well, yeah, because it extends a React.
Because it extends it, yeah.
What exactly
But what does that mean? Yeah, so it basically is a component that can render virtual DOM structures, and it can be nested. You can call other components and get their virtual DOM and basically get all down the tree. And then once you have all that virtual DOM, it gives it off to the React system. And then the React, there's a render method where we kick off the process, and it basically renders it. Does it support anything else other than render? Yes. That's the primary thing, but there are other methods that I'll get into later. That kind of the lifecycle methods. If you want to hook into after it has rendered, if you want to be able to get the DOM elements, you want to do some manual manipulations. If you want to do some jQuery on it or something like that, you can get access to that. So there's a lot of other things that you can tie into, where you need to. And also the same thing when it's going to be unmounting, when it's going to be getting rid of that component. There's hooks where you can tie into that if you need to do cleanup or whatever. So yeah.
Well, to complete your example, will we eventually see an app in an HTML DOM app somewhere that actually kicks in and uses this component?
Oh, yeah. There's. I'll show you right now where kind of how it gets used.
And presumably
right.
It would have an attribute of
right.
items on it.
Right. So yes. So here's the. So basically, I'm selecting. Let me show you the starting HTML that I'm working from. And so basically, I've got the header and then an app container, just a empty div, right? And then I'm including my bundle, my JavaScript that's been bundled up in this dist here. And so back to where we were. So this render function that came right here. So basically, I was selecting the app container div by the ID, and you could have used get element by ID or whatever, but I like the get square selector syntax. And so then I'm creating a function here where I'm going to pass in the data, and this is the render method. So React.render, pass in my top component, and then here's Mark was talking about where you pass in as attributes or properties as they call them, the items. And then I'm basically going to render that as inner HTML to this app container div. So that's whatever React comes up with, that's where it's going to stick it. And then it's going to keep, then later on it can update that as well. You can update when things change inside the component, it can re-update inside that div. And so going down a couple lines more, I've got if there was an error, I've got a render method where it's just going to basically put an error message instead of the container. So I just wanted to make it simple. And then here's the actual fetching of the data. So I'm taking the Axios client, passing in a URL, getting my my fake data here. So public fake. So that's my ID name foobar_baz. Passing that into so fetch data and render is basically going to say fetch the data. It's a promise. So then the response comes back. Actually, the response data is the actual data I want. Take that, pass it to the render method. If there was any errors, then I'm going to call render error instead. So that's and then down here I kick it off. So that's really all you need to do to get things going. And so when this thing loads, it does the XHR, the AJAX request, gets that data across the wire, and then puts it up.
So what kind of errors could you get? Like if you didn't have an ID in your data, would that raise?
Yeah, let's just change it. So if we put a bad path in, right? I mean, this will give me my error.
Okay.
Can't find that one, and so.
Now, is there JS DOM support so that you can have what's happening in the browser also happen on the server as far as when
Yeah, there is. And in fact, you don't. You can use JS DOM, especially like for testing, but you don't need to do that for rendering on a server. There's actually instead of render, there's render as string, and that just basically does what it says it does, and you stick that wherever you want, in the outgoing HTML. And then and there's also render as static markup, and that's if you were if you were just building content and you don't want to use React on the client. If you want to just build like maybe a blog or something, a static blog, you could use render as static markup, and that just leaves out a lot of the other stuff that it puts in there for React. So some of the IDs and checksums and stuff like that. So
on that HTML on line 31, if you wanted to, could you put that in your main HTML file and then somehow tell it to render itself?
Yeah. You could put this in a script tag and run it right there. Yeah.
Without a script tag, in the body of the HTML of your main page, have an app tag there, or do you have to render that from JavaScript?
You got to have somewhere where it's getting kicked off from JavaScript. Yeah. As far as I know.
I guess, said another way, do you always have to render your React components from JavaScript, or can it use some sort of template type of metaphor where you're picking up chunks of HTML code that has references to the template?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly people have went down some of those ideas and some of those paths of having different ways to do templates and stuff. One of the things that Facebook found, and I kind of really agree with after you get into it. I mean, the first thing people see this JSX and they throw up a little bit in their mouth, right? I mean, they say, oh, I'm going back to the old ways, I'm mixing my code, and the separation of concerns and all this, all these warning flags go off, and you say, well, that's stupid, and everything. But actually, if you try it and you use it, it's a little different. And the way it works is nice because you're not limited by a template or a template language. You can actually have the full power of JavaScript now to do whatever you want. And it actually is not, we're not concatenating strings and none of that kind of stuff. So it's actually much more powerful than that, and it takes care of you, on the DOM side, So there's a lot of the reasons people didn't like, mixing is, you really need to try it because it really makes things easy. And you don't have to use JSX. There's actually, I'll show you, there's a method where you could call methods directly to do the same thing. And it's not much more code, but this just feels like you're used to it. I mean, you look at it, you know what it means, and it's very nice. So try it and put your judgment aside for a second, until you try it and use it a little bit because it's most people like it. So all right, let me see what else here. Keep moving along. So, let me jump into some more stuff. So, we kind of talked about. Well, I'll show you some of this stuff in slides too, because coding takes a little longer than expected. But I do want to show there's a nice example here that. Ryan Florence did this at React conference, and it was really awesome. So hopefully you'll like it as well. Oh, I got to spell right here. Okay. Let's see, start, I think. Okay, so here's, I think we're on 8001. No, 8080, I'm sorry. Okay. So this is a,
Dog.
you've seen this?
Yes, I've seen it every time.
Yeah. So this is the an app that Ryan was an Ember developer for a long time, and so this is a just a mock-up of a monitoring system where they basically were. He's right now in this app. It's just a made-up thing where it's randomly changing numbers and it's displaying the cluster, you know, as if you're monitoring the cluster. And he's got a real system that does this. And so basically, we've got this thing in a loop, going as fast as it can, updating the numbers and all that. Now this was an older version of Ember, and since then they've done lots of improvements. And there's a new at EmberConf. There was a new glitter engine, I think, or glitter engine that's, you know, addressed some of these issues and whatever. So it's gotten faster. React is helping pave the way for some speed wars here. So this is one of the apps, and if we bring up,
So the point being that it's kind of jerky and slow.
yeah, you know, we're generating lots of data, and it's got a lot, you know, it's got a lot to update and a lot to look at. Here's the Angular version. Okay, so it's a little better, and as you hold, you know, your mouse over the things, you can start to see some of the. It's actually supposed to show you the query that it was doing or whatever, you know, and so, all right. Yeah, my fans are kicking on, so. And so then now, you know, let's bring up the React one. And so this, and this one actually, it even gets faster once the GC kicks in, but it, you know, it actually stays up with you as you move around the mouse. It's trying to show you the tooltips as fast as they can, you know, come up. But anyway, so that was kind of one of the, you know, neat things he showed. Now since then, you know, the Angular guys and the Ember guys have all, you know, honed in, and they wanted to, you know, do their shootout, and so then they made things better, and so we're pushing things forward. We're getting things faster, and so it's good. So this is not to say performance is the only reason to use React. It's one reason that it has good performance right out of the box without doing a lot of fancy stuff. You can even get better performance. This app is not doing anything fancy, but there is even a way to get better performance to kind of help React know when it needs to update things. So, but I'll try to talk about that later. But anyways, that's.
One of the things that really impressed me this year at the Angular conference was that literally during the open, you know, members of the Angular team were like, look, we're all in service of the same goal of improving user experience.
Right.
So we are learning from the React project.
Right.
And we hope that we have things to teach them as well.
Yeah.
And the good cast from the Ember project is actually contributing some really excellent stuff. It's helping us make Angular better.
Yeah.
So please stop being so tribal. We're all
Right.
trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
We don't have to, you know, those other guys don't have to lose so that we can win.
Right. No, it is, and it is all true. And the nice thing is that all these ideas, these new ideas or these challenging ideas are moving things forward in a good way. So, you know, I don't know, you know, in 5 years if there'll be a React or if everything is going to be, you know, using the same kind of things. You know, I don't know. One last thing, I'm going to go back and do some more slides. Just to show you, you know, you can basically create anything in this, you know, it's not limited, you know, whatever you can create in HTML, you can create in React. And, you know, nice, beautiful interfaces that, you know, that just like the iTunes store, you know, as far as how they move and animate and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, so it's good stuff. All right, so questions so far before I get into more? I mean, I'll cover a lot of these things again, or a little more slides and stuff. But yeah, go back there.
I'm experienced with Knockout.js, and so with Knockout, you can define your model, and then you can define different variables that depend on each other. And there's real clean separation between that and your view components, which are all declared with HTML.
Mm-hmm.
Is React reactive like that, where if you change your variable, the view is automatically updated? And is there any way to cleanly separate, or is it all kind of mixed together?
Yeah, it's nicely cleanly separated, and basically the primary way that you do that is by passing these props down through the hierarchy, and then just letting the render engine render it. And I guess this first slide here is talking about just the view, the first point there, and so we can use whatever model we want. So if you can use models that are dependent on each other or whatever, that's fine. But you don't have to. You can use string and array and list or a map or whatever. So you're not dependent on whatever you want to use for the model, and it basically just passing things down. And as things change, then it knows it needs to update the DOM. So that's that's kind of. And then there is ways to do state inside the component if you want to. It's in my opinion, it's kind of, you want to try to stay away from it as you can, because we know that mutable state is the root of all evil. That you heard that before. So managing all that state, inside of our apps is a pain in the butt. But you can do that, and you can. Yeah.
So that component we saw, the prop that you were passing in, if that prop changed by another component, then the component we're seeing there is going to automatically update.
Yeah, the other ones below it will automatically update. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying that you don't have to explicitly call a render method, that there's other ways that React would know to repaint something?
There's several ways, yeah. You can call the render from the top if you want to, again, like if you knew that from the top that you wanted to render, you can call that again, and that's actually not bad. It'll actually do a pretty quick diff on things and figure it out. You can also extend some of the components and give them a little more insight on things, especially like if you're using immutable data. You can do very fast checking of the props in the state just by reference checking and say, is this the same thing or not, and go on, so I can skip the render for these components. And that works really nicely, and so that makes sense. But there's also a way, and we'll get into in a second, where you can do set state, where you can say, I've got a piece of state that changed, and I want to trigger a render, and so trigger that and all the way underneath me, so.
Can you attach predicates to that, so you can say state changed and this holds, like you test some properties with it? In other words,
I don't
state
think
changed,
so.
And when the state changed, X was 1 and Y was 2. I mean, you can do tests.
You have hooks to know. I mean, you have hooks to be able to do to find out that things are changing or could be changing, and you can override what it does. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So just the view. So as we saw earlier, you can do most of it just with this render method. So that's kind of the big message. If you don't take anything else home, that's what you should know, is that you can basically create a render method, and that's all you need to do to make a component. And you can start making components. And you can pass any type of objects in, methods or functions or whatever, through the brackets. The virtual DOM, we kind of hit on this a little bit, but basically it's a virtual tree. It's very set up to do very fast diffing, and there's some it puts like some IDs and things on the tree, and it puts some checksums, so it does some pre-calculation on things, so it can check and know if things have changed pretty quickly or not, or whether it has to even look any further. So there's some nice hooks here to do that. The DOM is only one adapter that it can render to. So I mean, it's the first one, and it's the primary one they created it for. But it's actually independent. It doesn't require the DOM, and that's why we can render on the server. So we can render to string. So that's another adapter where it's just rendering to the string. You can render directly to canvas. So you can take the same, or a code and actually render to canvas. Really, you can build these adapters to do where you want. I mean, there's only a few methods you have to implement, and you could have another adapter. And so you could build something that renders a PDF or whatever.
Is that what React Native is?
Yes, React Native is taken advantage of the fact that this gets virtual tree, and instead of calling to the DOM, it's actually calling into libraries of native code and basically passing a message to display this or that or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, and I'll show that later.
When you say fast diff, is that kind of an internal function of the library itself?
Yes, it's part of the virtual DOM is to be able to.
So in essence, can you kind of think of it, if your model changes, that it's going to re-render the virtual DOM, and then once that's done, it actually does a comparison to the actual DOM to do incremental types of updates?
It's always doing it in the virtual layer with itself. So it keeps track, I render this and I keep track of that virtual DOM that I had, and then the next time I have a new virtual DOM and I say, okay, what's changed? And that's kind of the things on here I'm showing, like the greens. I guess the greens are different at the bottom there. And so then I'm saying, okay, I need to update a couple things in this parts of the tree, and I'm just going to update those things by themselves. And so it efficiently does that without having to do the whole thing. So especially if you've got cursor on the screen, or if you got text entered in, if that stuff didn't change, then it's not going to mess with it. So everything's going to be good, and it's just going to do the minimal changes it needs to. Good. Components. So the other thing we talk about, the components, second most important thing, I guess, to think about is the fact that these are kind of like functions. They're containers, and they're very simple to create. You don't have to know a lot to create a component. And just like we created that app, that's the same thing for creating subcomponents. It's just in this case, I've got a name component, and I've got a greeting component, and then here I'm calling inside the greeting component, I'm calling the name component, and I'm passing down some properties. So and I can basically just chain these things down, and so that's great. So you can build up all kinds of stuff with that.
Is that considered best practice to break things into simplest components?
Mm-hmm.
And change?
Yeah, I mean, within reason. I mean, obviously, if in fact the div and all those, it's got the basic HTML components already for you. So the fact that it looks like you can tell the difference because they're lowercase. So those are the built-in React components that are basically for generating HTML. And then like the uppercase one is the one we created. But yeah, so it's got the built-in ones, and but you can create your own and practice them, get them together. But yeah, the idea would be to make things simple so you can test things independently and all that. So. And
what do you use to test?
you can use anything really. I mean, the Facebook uses a tool called Jest, but I think it's ideal for testing their code, for testing the framework, but I don't feel the need to use it for normal code, for user code. I use Mocha, but you can use whatever your Jasmine would be fine, or anything really, as well as obviously all the end-to-end testing things as well. Can work. But and Michael, as you're saying too, you can choose to run it as a full system, or you can run it under JS DOM and test that way too. So it works either way.
So there's not a special harness that allows you to.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything, it would be Jest, and it basically it allows you to auto mock lots of stuff. But I don't like mocking, so I choose to not use that, and I don't need it. I don't see the need for doing mocking if you do your code properly, So for a lot of things, I mean, obviously certain things, but if you're passing things in and all that, then you don't have to mock very much. So anyway, so that's and obviously on the server you can also render strings, and you can parse the strings and check them with Cheerio and whatever. So top-down flow. So just like we talked about, things come in through the properties. Here I'm showing, we've got in the app, we've got app name coming in, we got items coming in, and then later on down in the app's render, we're actually taking those properties and giving a piece here and giving a piece there, and to the components, and so that's how it kind of breaks out. This was the JSX. I'm going to get back into some demos here, so but I just want to give you a little bit of this. So if you were to take this code at the top here, it actually renders into something like this. So it's basically calling create element with the name of the element it's trying to create, then the properties, In this case, the first one's empty, and then array of children. And then you can continue to iterate on down the same way. So it's pretty easy to do that code as well if you want to write React without JSX.
Syntactically, how do you know that you're in? How does the post compiler or whatever that translates that?
Babel?
Is there some syntax that you know that you're doing HTML versus JavaScript?
Yeah, I mean, by using JSX, it's kind of known that it has to think about that kind of thing. So I usually name my files JSX. You don't have to, but I do so my editor kind of knows what's going on. That it could have some JSX syntax in there, and then basically it can parse that just as it is. So
presumably it's not valid JavaScript. It
right.
presumes that it's the HTML.
Right.
Anytime
Right.
you see a bare angle bracket, that's not a lot. You couldn't do that in JavaScript.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty strong visual cue.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it's JSX is simplified. HTML's got all these kind of weird cases where you have some elements that are don't have a closing element or a closing tag, and JSX uses XML syntax for all these things. So it basically chooses to go simple so that it's easy for rendering. The other thing that Mark had mentioned earlier was like if, and I think it's on the next slide. Anything else on this slide anybody had questions on before I switch? Okay.
I had a quick question about
Okay.
the JSX.
Mm-hmm.
So how does JSX work with like HTML5, like the nav component, for example? Is there any like conflict, like semantic markup?
Yeah, all those are supported. I mean, all the new HTML5 elements are supported, and if they're not, you can file a pull request and they'll fix it. So yeah.
So real quick, just to be clear, like JSX never actually gets to your browser. It's transpiled before. It just creates a lot of JavaScript functions.
Right.
And then it basically says like React.create class or create DOM element, and then we quote like div. And there's a whole list on the site of all the elements that it supports. So
Yep.
But yeah, because it's running a virtual DOM, it doesn't have the same kind of problems that you have like, as far as support would be.
Yeah. Thank you. And so just a little bit more JSX. So here, a couple of the differences that you will have to know is like instead of class, we're using class name, and that I actually looked that up today to find out what the. I knew this was the case, but I didn't know the reasoning behind it. And it's like, so they actually, they thought back a lot about it, and it's not only because class is kind of a reserved word for JavaScript, but it's the DOM interface itself uses class name as an attribute. And so that's actually, they really built it to be a DOM, a virtual DOM, and so they went with the DOM convention, and that's why you also use the camel case for the attributes. So like autofocus has got a capital F, and so that's just the convention. They went with the JavaScript style camel casing, and DOM, versus other things, and then so that's kind of, so that's just a few things to know. There's a couple things like that, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's.
What's the double squigglies doing there?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, it's actually the first squiggly is saying, okay, I'm doing JavaScript, and then I'm actually creating an object.
Okay, I see.
And then this is they don't like you to do the dangerously set inner HTML. So this is a special way that if you want to like render your markup with Markdown or something and stick it in, then you can do this, but you got to go through this thing so it's nice and loud and clear that you're doing something goofy, because basically they can't do cross-site scripting protection for you if you do this, so it's up to you at that point.
Actually putting an object.
Yeah, I'm putting an object HTML which came from here. So I rendered HTML from this Markdown text, and then I took that and I stuck it in this div. So you could actually do, but normally you wouldn't want, unless you have to do that. Normally you want to stay within JSX, and it'll protect you against all the cross-site scripting stuff. So.
Why is data paths not kind of camel case?
Oh yeah, the data attributes. They're just that's the way you do them. I don't know why they. I guess because it's not on the DOM, it's actually just a HTML type.
HTML file?
Yeah, yeah. You can do any kind of, yeah. I was just indicating you can do any kind of data dash custom element, you know, custom attribute that you wanted to. So
that people don't litter their HTML with a bunch of attributes that HTML might want to use in the future.
Right, right.
So like the data hyphen whatever you want namespace, you can use it for anything, but they kind of reserve anything other than starting with data hyphen. But like you can add whatever data hyphen something attributes to your DOM that you want. If you want to like stick data in the DOM, pull it out later, those attributes are available.
Yep. And thank you. And then just one other thing on the style. If you want to do inline style, it uses just the JavaScript property style thing, so you can create your style in that. And there's other ways to do style, and obviously you can still do your normal CSS classes and all that kind of stuff too. But if you want to do it internal, you know, embedded, then you can do it that way. But there's a lot of different ways to do that. So that's one of the areas that's really being developed a lot and trying to work through. Okay, I'm going to jump through some of this stuff and try to get back to some more demos. I do need to talk about forms though. But here's state. So if you wanted to control state, you know, in your component, in this case I've got like a count. I could have, maybe I'm saying whether I want to show or hide a div on the page or something. You know, that could be state. And then basically, I'm basically down here. I'm calling set state, and I'm taking the original state, and it's off the screen, but I'm adding 1 to it to indicate it clicked. And so here I'm doing I got an on-click handler, and I'm actually binding that method to it. And so every time that method is clicked, then I'm increasing the state. So pretty simple stuff, but you can do, you know, all your normal kind of state that you want to. You could call out to you know, an HTTP XHR, make an XHR request. Thank you. Welcome. Anyway, so that's state. Forms, you saw a little bit there, but basically normal type of stuff for forms. There's, I like to use these uncontrolled components where you don't actually set the value. You can have a default value. You pass that in, and then you can monitor the changes if you want with change handlers. Or you can just wait till you submit. If you don't care about checking things until your submission, you can catch the on submit, and you can get the values at that point. So you wouldn't have to watch the values unless you're doing like a validation or something, which you can do with the on change. And so, but if you just, that way you don't have to worry about the value. If you're actually going to control the component and you want to control what value it shows, then you can do that with the value property. But you're going to have to create a state for it. And you're going to have to keep track of that state and change it. So every time it changes, you want to actually change the state so that it actually will display. Otherwise, it's not going to display because you've overwritten it what it's going to have there. So I kind of tend to go with this model here. So it's a lot simpler. But if for some reason you need to control the values, then you have that control. You can do that. All right. Let me jump forward to some more good stuff here. Okay, here's some more of the lifecycle components. So being a React component means that you're going to implement render, and that's going to be called at certain points when it's going to render. And then these are some of the other main component or methods that can fire. When it's getting ready to mount, there's a will mount. After it did actually create something, then there's a did mount. At that point, you have a DOM element you can start working with. Then later on, if you want to do updates, if it's going to update, then it's going to call this with the next properties, the new properties that are coming. The should component update is where you can implement some checks to say, I don't need to render. You know, I've got the new next props in the next state. I got the old props in the old state. I can do whatever quick checks, and nope, I don't need to render. You know, so you can do efficient stuff like that. There's component will update. After you've decided you're going to update, then it'll call this one, and then finally when it did update. So you have hooks in here, and then when it's getting ready to unwind or be unmounted, then you get the will unmount. So you can do, you know, on the will mount, you might, if you got timers or something set up, you can set that up here, and then you can undo it here. So you can clean up, you know, you got a nice set of life cycles. Again, the perf tuning, if you implement the should component update, then you can get that. If you're using immutable objects, then you can include this pure component, and that will do the check for you. And so and that'll do shallow checking and also it'll work with immutable object because it's a ref check. So. And then I mentioned the key. If you've got an array, you don't have to put the key, but if you do, it'll help it know, when things are changed. It's easier for React to keep track of things if you have a unique thing. Here's if you're rendering on a server, render to string, render to static markup. All right, let's get into some more demo stuff. Let me go over to React Router. So that was, React was the view layer, but pretty quickly you decide, oh, I want to do more with it. I want to have multiple pages, and I want to do things when I go to different pages and all that. Well, that's what React Router fills in it. And basically, Ryan and Michael Jackson created React Router based off of Ember. So they took kind of what they knew about Ember, the goodness there, and basically created something similar or inspired by it at least. And so you have the ability to set up your routes. They've actually got a new version 1.0 that's coming out any day now, I think. It's slightly different, but it's just a little more flexible. But it pretty much looks a lot like this. And so you can set up nested routes, and I've got handlers set up. So those are actually components. So I've got a component that's going to be set up for the app, and then if I go to the home page, then it's going to go there, and it's going to run that code as well. And then there's, if you go to the About page, then it'll have the app and the About code running. And so,
there's a React component.
Yes, yeah, there are React components too.
How would you handle authentication?
They've got some examples on I think right on the website for that. But basically, I think you can do after you run based on whatever your route it's on, you can run other code. You can go fetch things, or you can do validation, and you can redirect them somewhere else, or whatever. So you can do whatever you need to do that.
Where would you do your validation? You have a route, and you would invoke your React component. Would then you create another React component to do validation? And then
Yeah, you could, or if it could just be code too, depending upon where you want to hook it in. It could just be, could be right in here, in between. It could be another function you call. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. Some people are doing, they call them smart components and dumb components. So you have your dumb components, are just kind of your layout, your UI, and they're easy to test, easy to reuse. And then they might have a smart component that actually fetches data and does some things and then passes the props down. So basically, it does some things and then passes down. And so that's kind of a nice way to model things as well if you want to do it in components.
Just to clarify, these are SPA routes. I mean, these are like hashbang routes.
Both. You could do either one. Yeah. You can do if you use I'm showing the router history location version. With that one, it's actually using the history API, so it's actually the full, you can control the regular routes, but it'll also work with the hash routes, yeah. So if you use the history location, and you can run this on the server too, you can actually have code that works with or without JavaScript turned on. So it's pretty slick. Yeah.
I'm surprised to see routes specified using JSX.
Yeah, right. And I think the idea was it was easy because it was easy to do the hierarchy. Maybe that was the reason they chose that. In the new version 1.0, you can also do it pretty easily with just like a structure, and you don't need to use JSX, which I probably will prefer at that point.
So have the same nested with
yes.
indented structure.
Yeah, in the new version, that's what they're doing, and I mean that's an option. You can still use this style, but yeah. Flux, if you've heard anything about React, you might have heard of Flux. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but just to kind of explain it to you, it's the idea that has any of you heard of of CQRS or event sourcing? The idea of basically splitting up your queries and your updates into kind of separate channels, and like in event sourcing, you're actually passing an event down, and then things are listening to it, and the stores are getting updated, and so anyway, so Flux was kind of, I think it was inspired by those concepts, and the idea is that in other places we've talked about two-way binding where stuff updates and it updates something else and it triggers an update, you know, and you got all this nested things going on. Well, Facebook had trouble with trying to do that kind of thing, specifically around like their counts on their Facebook page for like unread messages and things like that. There were so many ways that you could read a message, and depending on how the thing is updated and triggered, you know, cascaded, the counts would be off. And, you know, and it took, you know, lots of man hours trying to figure that stuff out, and it could never fix it. And, you know, and a lot of people still have problems in their apps today with that kind of stuff, you know. So one thing they tried, and it actually worked out pretty well, was to simplify this flow where it's one directional, and we're basically like calling callbacks or passing event emitters and calling event emitters to pass the changes, and then coming around and render the view. You know, so it's basically a cycle, and you don't get in the dispatcher. There's one dispatcher, so it's kind of controlling things, and so you're not having multiple things update, and so you're kind of got this nice thing. After it hits the dispatcher, these things update in this order always, and so you can guarantee that, you know, that this data is updated and I can use it, you know, for the next thing, and so you don't have these weird things where lots of models are updating in different ways. So that's Flux, and that's a poor description because there's a lot to it, but I'm kind of out of time, so I'll have to come back and talk that one later, I guess. But any quick questions on that or anything? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to make a comment. So when Google Polymer first came out, I got really excited about that and started playing with it and actually tried to do some pretty complex things with it. And the two-way data binding ended up being a nightmare. I mean, it sounded great at first, but very quickly you realized that it was almost impossible to figure out what would happen and when it would happen. So determinism in the data flow among the components just went out the window.
Yeah.
And the Polymer guys admitted that was an issue, but they didn't have a good answer. And I think Facebook is finally leading the way with Flux and saying, hey, two-way data binding sounds great, but it's really not. It's not really what you want when you have complexity. You want to have an acyclic graph that is always axiom deterministic.
Yeah, and it.
Like using generators or something to just make sure there's always.
Well, it's just that, I mean, just the way things are hooked together, there's no cycles in the graph. So the way that things push down, you know, it can only move in one direction.
Yeah.
Right, that's why I was saying, like using generators. The first.
Oh, I don't know the exact actual implementation, but I mean just conceptually, you know. That's what I'm talking about.
So React Native, we did kind of touch briefly, but basically it's that idea that Facebook said, I can't get the user experience I want out of my apps. They actually would like to. They would like to do the hybrid, you know, mobile app, you know, the PhoneGap or Cordova type thing. If they could do that and get everything to work like, you know, native, then that would be perfect, and they would be happy with that. But they struggled with this, couldn't get the experience they wanted with native. So they basically decided to try. Well, what if we used our React, our virtual DOM and rendered, you know, or called into a native stack, you know, on the app. And so basically that's what happens here. You've got some native code that's in a component, you know, like a library that's sitting there running, and it kicks off the JavaScript. It actually uses the JavaScript, you know, interpreter runtime in, you know, iOS or Android, and then kicks off the code, and then basically creates this virtual DOM, and then basically that calls back into the, you know, the native code there. And it, you know, and the objects are more what you'd expect from iOS. So it's not like you're going to take your same exact HTML code and put it over into a native thing, but you're going to use the same techniques. So that makes it a lot easier for an engineer or developer to move back and forth between working on both things. You know, some of the code could be the same, you know, just using JavaScript, so you could do a lot of things the same, but the actual render code is probably going to be more specific to what widgets you have and that kind of thing. Native, as well as in the web world, people are creating components and are putting them out on NPM, and so it's great. I mean, it's just like, you know, just like you can pull a widget off there to do Google Maps, or pull a widget off to do whatever you want. There's, you know, lots of stuff's already built for you if you want to, unless you want to build your own. So.
You're saying the DOM that we use if you were targeting a native app is going to be more specialized. It's not really a. Yeah,
it's not a DOM. I mean, it's for a native app. It's going to be.
Really HTML
No, it's not HTML at all. It's in, you know, if you see the list here, these are the kinds of things that you're using for your components in iOS and Android, I guess, as well, or something similar to that. You know, so you're basically, but you're using the same types of techniques. So
how mature is React Native?
They've shipped. I think it might be next slide. Yeah. They've shipped, the one on the left is groups. So this is a hybrid. This is some React Native and some pure native code. And that's the Facebook Groups app. If you download that from the app, that's what you get. And then the one on the right is their new Facebook Ad Manager. And they're actually showing, you know, like selecting an image, and you can actually manage your campaigns and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty sophisticated. And that one uses, it's all React Native. And it also uses a new thing called Relay. So it's a new technology. They haven't open sourced yet, but they've been talking about. So I was going to mention that as well. And then I'll finish off with some demos, but whatever time we have left. There's so the future of where things are going. Relay and GraphQL were announced at that developer conference in February, and you know, everybody really liked what they saw. So they haven't open sourced it yet, but they're working on that. I mean, you know, it's basically they're using it internally, trying to prove it out and adapt it, and then make it, you know, provide a reference implementation. But it's basically the idea of having defining like what kind of data you need, and defining that in your component, you know, and then basically when the component gets ready to render, it's going to tell GraphQL, here's what I need, go get it. And you know, it'll go out to your data stores and get it, and then come back, and then you'll be able to render that. So it's pretty neat, and it really simplifies things from what we've seen. And people are, you know, building similar kinds of things to try and mimic that idea now, because it really is. It's a nice way to work. And then Falcor.js is from Netflix. They're using React to do their all their displays on all their different devices. So your web versus your, you know, all the different devices. They've got even set-top devices. They've got React running under the covers there to render those things when you type searching for movies and stuff. So that React is part of that thing. Anyway, they've been working on something called Falcor, which they just announced about a month or two ago. And it's not really out yet, but I mean, they're beta testing it now and trying to get ready to open it up. And it's kind of the idea that you can have, you have this whole data set, this big data in the cloud, and we've got to pretend like we have the whole thing on our app. And we'll let Falcor go and get what we need. And again, you can have it specify just the fields and the properties it needs, and on different devices you might need more properties or less properties. And Falcor can take care of that for you, and it'll come back and give you the data, and you can render it. And they're working with both the React as well as the Angular team to do, in Angular 2, I guess there's some kind of asynchronous binding or asynchronous templates or something where they can actually hook into the rendering and call out to Falcor or something like that. So it's pretty interesting. It's going to... yeah, so last couple things. And then I'll just show a couple more demos and close this out. If you want to find components, react.parts is a great place to search for components. You can also go to npmsearch.com, and you can do React and this or whatever, and React and chart or whatever, and find charts, chart widgets. You can also just do Google and do Google, GitHub, React, and whatever, and that'll find you a lot of stuff too. React.js.com, reactnative.com. I'm going to keep covering stuff at CodeWins. I think it's a game changer. I think you should use it today. It's ready to go. You can just use it for pieces of your project. Try it out. You know, just it's fun. Enjoy it. I've got the site there, codewins.com/STLJS. That's where I've got the slides. I've got a lot of the links and stuff. I'll put the video up there when it's ready, as well as it'll be on the Meetup site or YouTube site. And also, when my training is ready this summer, then I'll be putting it up there, as well as you can subscribe if you were interested in learning about, you know, the training and that. But basically do React and go a lot deeper into it. But let me show you before we, because I can't go out on slides, we got to show you some cool stuff. So let me show you some native stuff. So I lost my notes here.
How often are you running
Usually it's small stuff at first, but recently it's been really good. So, and maybe I'm just because I'm working in simple mainstream areas. I'm not pushing the limits or anything, but no, it's been really good. First when I started out, there was a couple things, and people already had stuff filed, and eventually, in a week or two, they're pretty active on it. So it's been pretty good. But yeah, no, it's been really really solid, and I've been pretty happy with it. So let me go over to. It's extremely easy to get going with native. It's really there's a generator that generates a project for you, and let me just pull up this is a small app that's we're pulling this up in Xcode, and if I click I'm going to run it on iPhone 6, and I click play here to run it. It's going to fire up a packager, and I guess the simulator's going. Yeah, here's the simulator. Okay. And so it's launched React Native, and so now we've got basically this simulator of it's fetching a soup from a website of recipes, and it's just putting up the image or whatever. And so that's as easy as it is to get going. And as far as like the code, if we jump over there, it's in index.ios.js, and so you might see here, here's where we're doing a fetch. So we're going out to Noodler app and getting a random soup. And then here we're rendering ingredients, cooked a soup, and then just some style and some different things. Somewhere here's a button. Yeah, here it says another soup. So if we change this and say, what's the French word for soup? Soup. I don't know. So we can go back over to, without even having to restart, we can go over here, hit refresh in the simulator, and it picks it up because it's in JavaScript, and so you can do instant.
That virtual DOM there is mapping to native components.
Yeah, it's mapping to native components.
It's mapping to something that eventually gets to a native component.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's not HTML per se.
But the code that's running, it's running in like a hosted JavaScript environment, but it's not a web view.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
I'm not familiar with. Before today, I was not a iOS developer, so I'd have to let you guys look because I don't know. But that's pretty cool that I can, I actually can pull up an app, or even from the random, from their generator, just make a simple app. That you can do that. So
you run that on Android?
Yeah, they're still working on it, I think, right, or something. Or it hasn't been open sourced or something. Anyway, but yeah, that's let's pull up another one. There's another good one here that I wanted to show you. So
I don't think it's a web view. I think it's like you said.
Yeah, it's a real. You're right. You can use WebView. You can use a WebView if you want to, but it's not needing a WebView. It's actually running.
They just use JSX if they're ready to WebView.
Yeah, I guess the WebView has probably got the same problems that they can't make it the UI work the way they want it. So yeah, let's back over to do another one here. There's let's do this one that's a house one. It's pretty neat. House. Okay. So I'm just going to open up the Xcode project. And play it. And so you can make it as fancy as you want, and you can put in other native code as well, during the launch and that and stuff. But this is basically like a realtor app, where you can basically select, these are native widgets, you know, to select the range or lists or whatever, and then how many bathrooms and bedrooms, and then we can click search, and then it's actually going to go and fetch, you know, and then it pulls up, you know, the houses in my price range or whatever, and you know.
So if you go back and put in a zip code, is that happening at a low-level component, or an action's going up to a high-level component, or how does that?
You really have the control to do it either way. So you could, you know, probably a lot of people do tend to do things at the, you know, the component and then pass it down, but you could pass that back up to the top and keep your app state all at the top. You know, if you're familiar with ClojureScript and Ohm, I believe that they like to keep the app state out of the app and keep it more. And so that works nicely with React as well. And then you pass things down with immutable data structures, you know, down through the data or down through the tree. And so they tend to keep things more out of the app and keep the app clean and just passing stuff down and just kick it back up if you want to, you know, do something. That's my understanding.
Do you have to pay is that $99 a year Apple developer fee? Or is that just if you want to actually load it on your phone?
Probably if you want to pay to put it on your phone.
Oh,
Like
okay.
you can do the simulator.
Yeah, and there's actually even a way to do fun stuff like this on the web. So there's React Native Playground, and see, I've already got. So I've got a sample one here, and it's got this little simulator by appetize.io, and so here, welcome to STLJS, and so I can change that code right here, and hit save and reload, and come on, there we go. Yeah, it went. Shoot, I clicked it too quickly, but yeah, so you can. So this is kind of like a code mirror or JS bin or whatever style editor, and you can share things. Yeah, I guess any questions on anything? I had lots more demos and things, but it just takes longer than I thought. So what else can I answer?
So like the first thing I'll probably do with JSX is mess something up and you know, try to track down my error or whatever.
Right.
Is there anything that'll help me?
Yeah. If you are, let's go back over to. Let me go over to like my one of my files here. So.
If you leave off closing tag or something.
Yeah. So if I start goofing up the syntax, let's see. What can I do? I'll leave off the. Basically, I've got ESLint telling me that I've got a mistake already. So that's tied in with my editor. So I'm seeing I've got these squiggly things showing me there's errors already. You know, so that it helps you to do that, and that's a really good thing. If you got something like ESLint and Babel, and you got your whole workflow set up, then you can hook all this stuff together, and you know instantly when you're making mistakes, or a lot of them. So yeah, Zmax, yeah. But you can do it with, you know, VI or Vim or Sublime Text or whatever, Atom. Yeah.
So how about if you like misspell item.name?
So I've got an error here, and it says item FJT is not defined. So yeah.
Right, but if you weren't getting these checks in Emacs, what would the next thing be that would tell you there was a problem?
Yeah, you can have. Well, you can run ESLint as a compile step. So that's one thing I would do if I wasn't running it in the editor. But then also JSX, or you know, the JSX compiler can spit out an error too if it sees, you know, that it's.
So
Babel would catch it. And then if you made it all the way down to runtime, and you a lot of the components, you can define the properties that you're expecting. There's an extra method you can define if you want to actually have it look for these, you know, validate these properties, and then you can get additional debugging saying you didn't pass in this property, or, you know, or whatever. So you can get that as well. So if you want to. But yeah, it's pretty good, and it's a nice flow.
Is your red square complaining about something, or is it just not?
Which one?
Under the unordered list, the red squiggly. Is that an error, or is that just normal syntax?
This right here, the squiggle. That's just the it's the support in Emacs for this funky combination of things is not 100%. I mean, it's not too bad, but there's still a few things that don't.
Is that web mode?
It's web mode, yeah. So, but yeah, that's a hard thing to mash together, I think. So yeah, it's not bad. I mean, it hasn't caused me any concern, but yeah, it's.
Is there support for that in Eclipse or IntelliJ?
Yeah, there a lot of the major ones on Facebook's site. And we'll wrap up here, but if you go to React.js.com, that'll redirect you over to their site, and then you go over to Docs, and there's, I guess the other thing I'd show you here, there's tons of little sample apps right here on the page that you can play with, and you can change these things, and they're actually, they're live. It's actually got, React running, and so live updates. And then there's a whole getting started tutorial, which is nice, and a thinking in React. Now it's nice to walk through to take you through the concepts. Here's JSX more in depth, so about those kinds of things. We mentioned earlier about the supported attributes and tags. All that camel casing down here is their tags and attributes that are supported and all that, and how you deal with things. And then what were the question we were just talking about? Editor integration, yeah. So I think complementary tools here is where they were. Let's move to the wiki. So they got on the wiki now. So now they talk about Sublime and Atom and build tools. I guess I don't see Eclipse yet, but there's the new one from Microsoft. The Nuclide is Facebook's Atom-based one, but then Microsoft's got one called Code Mirror or Code. So that one's based on Atom, so I would think that the Atom things might work, maybe.
They actually don't have JSX yet.
Oh, they don't have it? Okay.
Yeah, it's really.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it shouldn't take long, hopefully.
Yeah,
So.
it's in the pipeline.
But yeah, any other questions or things? I think I'm out of time, but yeah.
Have you heard much about the Android, the progress? I mean, when it first came out, they did say like 6 months or so, right? But I Googled a few times.
I don't think they made progress.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I was hoping
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
that they would hold, but that's whatever.
Yeah, hopefully. They're pretty, they're pretty good to communicate with. If you get on one of the channels, or if you get on and raise issues, they'll talk right back with you, and and chat with you and stuff. So you can go on there and find out. I mean, or Google it and see if there's somebody who's already asked that question, because But yeah. So any other questions?
Comment, partly. I did download React Native, and I'm trying to remember if I'm remembering right. I thought what I read regarding the web view question or whatever was they said they're actually doing like the differencing algorithm in the JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of then do like a messaging to.
Yes, it's a message. It's an asynchronous message.
So it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like two processes, like.
Right.
communicating. I thought it was interesting. And tell me if I remember right. I think they said that means you could even, for example, use like Chrome developer tools and actually be
Right.
talking to your iPhone or whatever. I mean, it sounded kind of wild, but.
Yeah, you could, and I've seen that they did that at the React conference. They demoed doing that as well. Yeah,
So you can use that profiling tool chain
Yeah.
to look, okay.
yeah, it was pretty neat.
That's
Pretty neat. So anyway, well, I guess I'm out of time, so I better wrap up. So thank you.